Welcome everyone to another live TED-Med event focusing on great challenges in health. Today's topic is a very, very interesting one. It's making prevention popular and profitable. So I apologize for that alliteration, but prevention, popular, and profitable is our topic today. It's an important area emerging in the context of healthcare reform and how patients and physicians can play an active role in the preventive side of health and medicine. My name is John Nosta. I'm your moderator today, and welcome to the Great Challenges program, sponsored by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. The goal of Great Challenges is to look at the 20 most pressing and complex problems in health and medicine today. Our objective is not to solve these problems, but to advance the dialogue, to begin the discussion, to help create a higher level of information and engagement, not only with our panel, but also with our community that is participating in our talk today. We'll be taking questions from Google Hangout and on Facebook and on Twitter, so please join the conversation. That's Twitter @TEDMed, and please hashtag that with Great Challenges, an S at the end, plural, and we'll try to get as many questions as we can. Again, my name is John Nosta. I'm the Executive Vice President and Senior Strategist at Ogilvy Common Health. Today we are delighted to have a robust panel to help us discuss this topic. With us today is John Clymer, Executive Director of the National Forum. John is a recognized health policy and systems thought leader whose counsel and hands-on leadership have helped organizations and companies sharpen their focus and increase their impact on health. David Roddenberry is the co-founder of Healthy Wage. He began the company in 2009 in response to recent academic research demonstrating that cash incentives can triple the effectiveness of weight loss programs. Naz Sykes is a highly respected nonprofit leader and is recognized for her innovative thinking and her passion to shift the cancer research paradigm. Her expertise is in formulating initiatives to empower the public to get involved. She also serves as the executive director of the Susan Love Research Foundation. And Benjamin Young is the CEO and co-founder of the popular iPhone and Android app Nexercise, and was recently featured on the Emmy Award-winning show The Doctors as the best fitness tracker for weight loss. So I think we've got a lot of very, very interesting voices that bring an eclectic perspective to our discussion today. So let me take a stop here and present to you the typical patient, the typical consumer in the world today. He or she is 35 pounds overweight, is developing this quote-unquote metabolic syndrome. Their blood sugar has now moved into the area where it's now type 2 diabetes, so some type of control is necessary. He or she goes to the physician with this clinical syndrome, and what do they get? A pill. And I want to challenge the group to understand our basic thinking about how pharmaceutical science, medicine is driven around the context of taking the pill to solve our problems, or perhaps even worse, waiting for the disease to emerge and then solving it with a pill. John, we talked earlier, perhaps you could help frame that context up for us. Does that make sense to you?
Sure, it does. And I think the first thing that we need to do is stop thinking about patients and start thinking about people, because most people are healthy, and the most important thing, the most valuable thing that we can do as a society and in the health arena is to help healthy people stay healthy. We spend in this country about $2.7 trillion, or 17% of our gross domestic product, on healthcare, and 95 cents out of every dollar goes to diagnose or treat disease after it occurs. We're spending barely a nickel, or south of a nickel, of every dollar to prevent disease. And that's where we need to focus more of our attention. And I think all of us on the panel are glad that at the TED-Med conference in 2012, making prevention popular and profitable was chosen as one of the great challenges, going to the importance of changing the dynamic, changing this equation, so that as a nation we are investing more in preventing disease and keeping healthy people healthy. And that needs to take place primarily at a community level. Now, that can mean in a neighborhood, it can mean in a city or county, it can mean at a state, it can mean in an employment setting, in a workplace, lots of different places. And the goal in every instance is to make healthy choices easy choices for people to make. So if people can make the choice to be physically active, if people can easily make the choice to eat healthy foods, if people can make the choice not to use tobacco products, those three things will make an enormous difference in the well-being of the American people and in our economy, because 75% of disease in this country, or of healthcare spending, is related to chronic disease, and 75% of chronic disease is preventable. So we need to stop thinking about people as patients and start thinking about them as people and how we keep them from becoming patients.
John, let me ask you a little bit about some of the data that you cited, because I found it very interesting. Oftentimes, we live on the margins of efficacy, 1%, 2%, 3%. But you mentioned 95% in your discussion, 95% of dollars, or what was that?
Right, 95 cents out of every dollar that is spent on health in the United States goes to diagnose or treat disease after it occurs, leaving less than 5 cents on the dollar to be invested in prevention and keeping people healthy.
But isn't that human nature? How can we address that? Maybe the panelists can. I'm concerned that it becomes a bigger, broader issue, and I see a smile on John's face about that comment. Naz, I mean, from your perspective, are we swimming upstream?
I think so, and I think it's also the idea that we don't understand, at least the public doesn't understand the collateral damage of, that one pill that may be the solution. So, and especially for us in breast cancer, we have a lot of treatments for the disease, but there is a lot of long-term effects and collateral damage that comes with it. So it's critical to understand that prevention is, and however way we want to define prevention for whatever disease, is critical, because there's a lot of side effects and issues that comes with that instant gratification of taking that one pill that may fix the problem.
But does the one pill really fix the problem, or does it just make things worse with the myriad of side effects and things? So
exactly, yeah.
Well, from Facebook, we have a question from Raid Mansour. And this person asks, how can we move away from these messages on billboards and these sort of social media kind of initiatives, cigarettes equal death kind of a perspective, and develop a more meaningful dialogue? Is that part of the linchpin to driving success in this category?
I mean, if I can jump in and just comment on that, I think we become immune to the billboards. You see it all the time, and I think you just, you start ignoring it. And I think it's critical to really, if we want to talk about prevention, and it has to become a national priority, and it has to become a national campaign. And and for us, again, I'm coming from the breast cancer world, and our focus to really understand what is the cause of a disease, specifically breast cancer, and how we can prevent it. It's critical to get the public involved in that process and in that discussion, being involved in research, and understanding why prevention is the key. So I think putting it up on a billboard and stating the statistics, you just become immune to that over time. So unless we can figure out a way to really engage and mobilize the public to get interested and get involved, and for us, we believe, getting involved in the research process to understand, cause and prevention of a disease, that's really the only way that we can change the conversation.
Yeah, I definitely
Go
have
ahead,
to.
Doug.
to chime in here too, because if you think about it, those billboards are really like triggers. Like, I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with BJ Fogg's research, but he's talking about behavior change, and it's a result of motivation, your ability, and those triggers. And so I think one of the important things that we really need to do is really stem in onto the motivation. And I think that there's a big gap in that of understanding, because if you think about disease, right, it's not something that usually immediately onsets. It's years or maybe months of bad behaviors that result in an impact down the line through choices that may be fun at the time, whether to eat poorly, your dietary things, your not being active. And so a big portion of that is really focusing not so much on these kind of scare campaigns, but we need to target into the motivation of making it more socially acceptable to be healthy and bridging that divide, and really focusing on the pleasure of, you know, proper diet, proper exercise. And so I think that the billboards can be effective. I just don't see a lot of them right now the way they're being implemented as so.
So Benjamin, let me jump on top of that statement a little bit. I think that we see the celebration of athletic performance, the celebration of health and wellness in the context of Nike.
Yes.
You know, it's all about the human experience. Yet on health and perhaps on the medicine side, it becomes more ominous. Are there lessons to be learned about not just yelling a message, but understanding behavior and driving it in that way?
Yes, I think so, because if you look at Nike has done an excellent job. I mean, I remember seeing an ad where you see somebody running in the background, and it turned out to be somebody overweight. It looks like from a perspective from far, you can't tell whether it's an athlete or not. And I think it's bridging that to the everyday person, because everybody doesn't necessarily need to see the aspirational person with the six-pack abs or the high performance. I think it's reaching a broader audience and understanding that anybody can be successful over time. And I think that can be done into prevention as well.
I think that it comes down to this notion of carrot and stick. But what I'm hearing, perhaps, is that it's about empathy. Are we empathizing with patients who have a chronic disease, have cancer, have obesity, diabetes, or are we kind of yelling at them, telling them something to do? I'm interested in the psychodynamics of getting people to recognize the significance of their condition and acting on it.
I'll gladly speak a little bit. Just in our own community, our app and exercise is a big social portion, and we've had people with diabetes who have had issues with weight loss, and the community there has been extremely supportive. And I think that, you know, when somebody is finally at a point, yelling is not the proper mechanics. It's helping them understand what the problem is, socially accepting in them, and helping them drive that change into the proper direction.
Interesting. I want to take a step back because we're moving into some of the success stories about this. But I want to go back to this 95 cents out of the dollar. And this gets back to physician coding and how our healthcare system is paid for. Are we making the accommodations so that billing codes can reflect wellness and preventative care? Or is that an obstacle that needs to be addressed? Maybe Naz or John can jump in on that.
Well, we have a perverse reimbursement system right now, or perverse economic and incentive system in clinical care that rewards healthcare providers for providing volume of care rather than quality and value. And often the system places a premium on treatment over prevention. So, for example, the AMA found when they did a study that physicians could get more in reimbursement for clipping a patient's toenails than they could for counseling a patient on how to kick the habit of smoking and getting them on course to do so. So there is a perverse incentive system, but we're talking there about the health care system, and I think we need to shift our thinking, because when we focus just on health care, it's like trying to address a flooded kitchen with a mop, when what we really need to be doing is going to the source of the flood and cutting off the water. So we need to go upstream in our approaches, and there often are much more economically efficient and higher impact ways to help people have healthier lives and make healthier choices, which people do want to do. Smokers, for example, and the reason I'm citing smoking as an example is because it is the leading preventable cause of death in the United States. Smoking and tobacco use claim the lives of 444,000 Americans every year. 440,000 premature deaths a year. And it is preventable. And 70% of smokers want to quit. So it's not always a matter of motivation. It's sometimes more a matter of making it possible or making it easier for people to do so. And there are some extremely low-cost things that we can do to change the environment that make it easier for people. So, for example, people find it healthier, and there's ample research to show this. People find it easier to kick the habit if they work in and if they dine in environments that are smoke-free. So it doesn't cost anything to have a workplace become smoke-free. And many communities have learned that this is an important thing to do, and so you have clean indoor air laws now in a lot of communities and even in some states. So there are simple things like that that can be done. There are others that are very complex that need to be layered on. So simply making a workplace for a smoker smoke-free isn't going to enable them to kick the habit. It's going to require additional interventions such as counseling, such as having a plan, such as having access to online or telephonic assistance, such as in some cases having medical assistance in detoxifying and kicking the habit. But it takes all those different things, including the upstream interventions.
So, David, I want you to chime in. Ben, we'll get to you in a second, but let's go to David, because tell me more about the cash incentives and how that worked to triple weight loss.
Well, what we find is that poor decision making is, every decision that you make daily has an impact on your health, but you don't know how bad the impact is. So the goal is to quantify or provide a value, take that amorphous health of the long run and bring it into the short run. And the financial incentives become a way to do that, so that you're rewarded and you get positive feedback for doing things that are good for your health. And that's the sort of idea behind Healthy Wage, but I think it's more general for prevention. We have to make the healthy choice the rewarding choice, and financial incentives or prizes or contests are a way to bring that long-term health to the short run and help people make better decisions.
So explain to me a little bit about the nature of prizes and rewards for, let's say, weight loss. Are they tangible, or are they sort of psychological trophies that you collect? How does that play out?
Well, I think it has to be tangible. Everyone who's overweight understands that it's bad for their health in the long run. There's a lot of shame attached with weight gain and being unhealthy, but on a day-to-day decision making, you're always, we live in an obesogenic society where you're presented with food and you're overwhelmed with opportunity to make bad choices. And so taking the cash or positive feedback, social encouragement, and bringing that each time you make a positive decision, getting rewarded for that is a really effective way to make prevention fun, popular, and lucrative.
So how much, quantify that for me? Do I get $10, or how does that work? And how do I weigh that against an addiction like nicotine?
Well, our goal with Healthy Wage is to give personalized incentive plans. So you tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we devise a incentive plan for you based on your characteristics. Now, we're not there yet. Right now, we offer a program like a 10% challenge where you double your money for losing 10% of your weight. But that's over 6 months. So you're talking about a relatively long horizon. And so if you can have the consumer opt in, having them put a little skin in the game and contribute to their make an investment in their health, increases engagement, and it's the same finding with smoking cessation. That cash incentives, once you reach a certain size, and if you allow the opt-in notion, they can be an effective tool, for driving behavior change and making prevention both popular and lucrative.
David, I'm going to come back to you. I want to talk about how this works in different instances: obesity, cigarette smoking, a cholesterol lowering. But Benjamin, I know you've been trying to get in, so let's go to you first.
Yeah, so I wanted to chime in on that. A lot of things with human psychology, you'll see it with smoking cessation. I've had friends who have had weight loss, is that a single failure will stop it. Say you get sick for a week with weight loss to your exercise program, or you work a long day, people will fall off, or you work out and you have a bad day, or you have that cigarette. One of the key things that, at least also, I know we're going to talk a little bit more about technology, but understanding and celebrating that these single failures should not be points to completely drop off of the map. Because if you look at the systematic pattern that people are through their program, it's, one day, missing a day at the gym is not going to kill you. And so one of the things that we've noticed, and I agree with David, is that rewards can be effective, but there's the key thing too is, for example, an exercise has rewards like airline miles that you can use for gift cards, for example. But there's a balance associated with rewards too, because we've also seen that people, you don't want them to be solely driven by the extrinsic rewards, because that sets the expectations, and that if that expectation is altered, you actually can see people drop off. So the key thing is using these carrots, as you like to say, as a little bit of a lure, and getting them actually having the intrinsic motivation to continue and accelerating those successes. And I think that this can be applied to really all sorts of prevention. And
so what you said is interesting to me, and that's that while successes are important and successes are rewarded, failures are real dangers. That if you stop once or you get sick, that loss of momentum can be a real critical point. You can chime in on that, please?
Yeah, and so the key is aggregating, so for example, the key is aggregating all your past successes into a pattern. We have a recency bias, right? Like we hear something in the news, something happens, an accident, we're afraid to drive or fly a plane. But we haven't looked at the systematic successes over the time. And I know we're going to talk about technology later, but that's where it can apply. It's like, so what? You missed a day at the gym today, or you're off a week. Look at your historical pattern. You've been very successful. You've already lost 10 pounds. Or can you imagine you haven't smoked all these days? One failure is not going to set you back. Let's get you back on track.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Well, we're getting a lot of information, a lot of people tweeting in, and I want to get to the Twitter conversation. It'll take us a little bit off topic, but some interesting questions that are coming in, particularly what is the role of government in public health policy versus the role of the clinician? And I'm going to extend to that and say the private citizen. So how does that fit into this? And it seems like government has taken a stand in corn subsidies and high fructose corn syrup and leveraging the success of that industry, which may come at the expense of obesity on the other side of the equation. So I offer that to the group.
Well, government is involved in health policy every day, sometimes unwittingly. There are an awful lot of unintended consequences of policy decisions, and one of the things that needs to happen to enable people to make healthier choices more easily is for health to be considered in all decisions, including in public policy decisions, because there are health ramifications of transportation policy, there are health ramifications of housing policy, there are health ramifications, to be sure, from agriculture policy. So you just talked, John, about price supports. And that's one of the keys. We on the one hand are making unhealthy foods or less healthy foods inexpensive and more accessible, and on the other hand we're we're using public resources to encourage people to make healthier food choices. So in that case and in others, public policy is in conflict. So we need, for example, where transportation systems are being designed to take into account how they're going to affect people's mobility, such as access to health care, but also walkability and the freedom and ease with which people can engage in physical activity in and around the places where they live and work. And clean air is another instance. So there are lots of ways that public policy plays a big role in making environments either healthy or unhealthy, and often they're unintended ways. So we need to be more conscious in policy making to ensure that health is factored into all policy making.
One of the questions that has come in on Twitter, and I think it's a very important one here, is the actual measurement of success, whether it be from a hard science epidemiological perspective or even softer endpoints. But Ellen Silvius on Twitter writes, and what are the most effective ways of measuring primary, secondary, or secondary prevention in this type of area of wellness? Benjamin, I mean, you seem to talk on that a little bit. Do we measure success, or we just hope for success by putting a program out there?
You definitely can measure success. You just need to you need to track success. What are your success metrics, right? And define them over a period of time, and understand that you're really looking for systematic change over time, and that it's a lot of times these kind of all or nothing things really result in people failure. It's too much at a given time. We're trying to create behaviors, and sometimes that is through gradual change versus drastic change.
So what are some of the common endpoints that have been successful? For example, weight loss, smoking reduction. Are there some endpoints that are winners and some endpoints that might be losers that we should be aware of? And I'll flip that back over to you, John, also. Benjamin, maybe from your perspective first.
Yeah, I mean, it's really about, we have to look at what are the kind of the key performance indicators. What are we trying to accomplish, right? Ideally with smoking, you want to completely quit because the addiction of the nicotine is fairly strong. With weight loss, it's really about getting yourself to a comfortable BMI and weight things. So it's about balance, right? If you weigh yourself constantly, you're going to fluctuate. So it's really about driving the fat loss, getting yourself to acceptable range, and then really just creating a pattern of a healthy, livable weight.
John, with respect to heart disease, stroke prevention, are there some simple goals that we can put in front of patients that appear to be less than insurmountable obstacles? Because I think sometimes it's just, no, I can't do that. It's too much. Do we take baby steps? What are some successes that you know that have been successful?
Well, I think Ben just addressed goals and measures for individuals, and it's important, I think, to keep in mind that there are other decision makers who should be looking at the right metrics that will help them figure out whether they're attaining valuable goals. So let's take employers, for example. A lot of employers have come to recognize that the health of their employees is not just about a cost that they're trying to minimize, but it actually can be about an investment that they're trying to maximize. In other words, healthy employees tend to be higher performing employees, which in turn increases the competitiveness and the corporate or organizational performance of their employers. So employers have looked at things that they can do to change the environment, to change benefit structures and incentives, to provide encouragement to employees, to change social standards in their communities, all to promote and encourage health. And they look at things such as the percentage of employees who smoke or use tobacco products and whether that's going down. They're looking at measures such as sleep and quality of sleep. They're looking at diet, and they're using some very innovative ways to do that. Larger employers that have food service facilities on site are able to look at cash register receipts and tell what people are buying. And Pitney Bowes, for example, did something very simple yet innovative when they changed the pricing structure in their employee cafeteria. They recognized that diabetes was the biggest threat facing their population. So that goes to obesity and to healthy nutrition and physical activity. They wanted to make it easier for their employees to choose healthier foods. So they raised the price in their cafeteria on burgers and fries and less healthy foods, and they used the higher margin on those foods to reduce the price on the healthier foods, on the grilled vegetables and on the salad bar and fruit and things like that. And immediately they could see a measurable change in consumer behavior. People started consuming the healthier foods, and that helped to address the pre-diabetes and obesity problems that the employer faced. It helped to reduce their increases in healthcare costs, and it helped their employees. It was a win-win in terms of quality of life for the employee as well as return on investment for the employer and their shareholders.
That's interesting, John. It's a bit atypical to use the workplace cafeteria and sort of rig the prices. David, I know you've got some comments. I want to go over to you now, and then we're going to follow up with Naz on the nature of motivation in patients with cancer. So, David, first over to you.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think I could tie it back to the role of the government. I mean, they're the largest payer for healthcare, and the decisions that they're making have in terms of what they'll reimburse and how they structure plan designs, have a huge impact on on our health and on prevention in general. And leading forward-thinking employers have been incorporating cash incentives into their outcomes-based cash incentives into their plan design. So that's a $300 or $400 credit if you're at a healthy weight or a non-smoker. And for equity reasons, we haven't yet felt comfortable having federal government incorporate that into Medicare, Medicaid. But I think that as we measure prevention and have a good idea about what behaviors are costly and also not just monetarily costly, but costly in terms of productivity and quality of life, I think it's absolutely appropriate for the government to incorporate that into the plan design for for the patients or the consumers that they're covering.
Naz, I want to flip it over to you. It's been said that the 6 most powerful words in the English language are "I love you" and "you have cancer." And I want to talk about the nature of the patient in the oncology space and how motivation shifts there. And are there any lessons to be learned, or when you're talking about wellness, recovery, and cure, how does that kind of stack up in the context of the broader disease sort of milieu or continuum?
Well, I think, especially for breast cancer, we've done a really good job coming up with a lot of treatments for the disease. And unfortunately, we tend to overtreat. And it goes back to the incentives for the physicians. Breast cancer has become a very lucrative disease. And the treatments that we offer and the testing that we offer generates a lot of cash for, the medical institutions. So, there's usually, when a patient is diagnosed with cancer, the goal is to get them through the treatment. There's not enough research and studies to follow them 5-10 years post-diagnosis to really understand, do they have a recurrence? Why do they have a recurrence? Did they do anything that is out of the ordinary to possibly prevent that recurrence, be it a healthier living, diet, exercise. And we've seen in breast cancer that, the number one risk reduction for breast cancer is exercise and maintaining a healthy weight. And that's also plays a huge factor in post-diagnosis and when you're done with the treatment. So women that actually, really change the way they live, what they eat, how often they exercise, how they maintain a healthy weight, they have a lower risk of recurrence compared to patients that really go back to the old habits. But unfortunately, again, this is not a conversation that happens in a medical setting. The goal is to get you through the treatment and put the cure stamp on you and say, now you're a survivor and go out there again. And there's not that much conversation about what can we do to prevent a recurrence, and the cost of that recurrence is really not a discussion that we have.
Interesting that we look at recurrence and kind of project out what's working and how can we shift prognosis. And a question just came in from an amusing Twitter handle. The name is 3 Hungry Boys.
Oh, good.
Very interesting.
Yes.
They ask very simply, can we shift the discussion from researching treatments to funding prevention?
Yes.
And my question is simply this. Where do the dollars come from if you're funding something that doesn't happen? Is that pharma dollars? Are those government dollars? How do we shift the emphasis to prevention and fund it?
That's a great question, and it's something that is incredibly frustrating for both the research community, especially researchers that are innovative, they're thinking outside of the box, and they want to focus on prevention. Unfortunately, the NIH, the NCI, all the major funders, they're more focused on basic research. They're not necessarily focused on translational research or research focused on prevention. So there's not enough incentives for researchers to focus on, research that is looking into preventing a disease, or what are the causes of a disease and how we can prevent it. And so to really look at the whole prevention conversation, we need to that's a huge factor. There needs to be more research into prevention, and there needs to be dollars to support that. And we need more organizations that are out there raising money and giving out grants to really dedicate a portion of their portfolio and what they invest in innovative projects and research studies that are looking into preventative measures, because we just don't have enough.
Naz, perhaps you could comment just a little bit about oncogenes and genes being turned on and turned off. The question is simply, are we doing enough to unlock the science of prevention? So if you have a particular gene or mutation, is science looking at the ability to prevent cancer by recognizing that on-off gene? And is that part of a preventive strategy that's in place that perhaps is coming out of breast and oncology?
It's an interesting approach, and it's definitely a promising, avenue and something we need to look at. But it goes beyond just turning a gene on and off. It's also the environment. It's you can turn a gene off, but how do you know that it's not going to come back on again? And that leads into diet, exercise, environmental factors, carcinogens. There are so many different things that goes into getting a disease. It's not as simple as can we turn a gene on and off. There's a lot of external factors that will have an effect on your body. So we also need to look at that. And that's the part that I think it's important for the public to get involved in research studies. So us, to move away from the animal models where you can give a mice cancer and you can take it back from them because they don't get necessarily breast cancer. But we need to actually study people and their environments and what they do and what they eat, and really understand what is happening, not just on a gene level, but also the external factors that are affecting your body.
Terrific. I want to just take a moment and thank all of our participants in social media. We're getting a lot of questions, and one of our guiding principles is to engage a broader group of people outside of our experts. So a question comes in from someone who's called the health maven. So I feel compelled we have to ask that question. And Benjamin and David, over to you. What is the single most important behavior change that people can make to increasing well-being? And I'm going to extend that question. Is there some single behavior that seems to be working best, or some really good carrot or really good stick?
Yeah, I'll gladly chime in there. Defining a single behavior is very difficult, but one thing that we've noticed is that if you make incremental change daily, that is very strong. And so what I mean by that is having the ability to execute on something. So doing at least 15 minutes of physical activity, whether it's just taking a walk, as a low threshold ability of barrier, and then increasing your goals over time, it allows you to create a better habit. And so when I think of like habit formation, if you're not constantly thinking about it and having something that you can easily execute upon, it's a lot more difficult. And so that's my answer to it. David might have a different answer.
I would definitely say smoking cessation. It's just too costly. So if you quit smoking, that's the biggest improvement that you could possibly make to your health. I mean, not just in terms of dollars, but it's debilitating in terms of your life and your length of life.
Mm-hmm. Niles Franz from Facebook asks a question about success stories. And I think that there are many different pills plus plans, different tools, different apps that are accessible to consumers and clinicians. When you think of home runs, when you think of things that have really worked, David, your system is certainly possibly one of them. I'm curious, what comes to mind as success stories that can help, that we can promote or leverage to gain traction?
Well, we've had a lot of success with a community-based model of weight loss, and incorporating both the social and the financial incentives. So you bring together 5 or 6 employer groups in the same office park or the same general area, and you get them competing against each other, and you have prizes at the end. And that combination of seeing the people every day as well as having a significant prize at the end is really motivating. And you can see it on a population-wide basis. I mean, a 5 to 7% population weight reduction over a 3-month period that you can sustain with check-in based incentives on a 3-6 month horizon. So I think that microcosm or model is something that we can bring to larger communities if we mobilize the different stakeholders together, and that's the challenge, just roping all of these different stakeholders together.
And David, and this is actually to you. You see with that people are actually engaging in it daily, right? That community creates that daily engagement, which sustains that motivation.
Oh, and more than daily. I mean, it's like hourly. I mean, we're bombarded with bad choices every day. I mean, we could walk, or we could take the car, or we could eat the cake, or we could not. So, I mean, how do you make good micro decisions? And we got to empower the consumer with data. Like, she needs to be able to know, like, what impact is this bad decision going to have on my health? How bad is this for me? Yeah,
exactly. And then the nice thing too is systematically, since you're capturing all that data, showing trends over time. I think that's very important. So when people do have that one cigarette, or they do take that alcoholic drink, that they realize it's not a drastic failure into their routine, and that they can get back, that they can get past these setbacks. And that's where the community support, I think, is really huge. We've seen that, I've seen that in several successful apps or programs that the community allows bringing people back up through those failures.
John, we've been talking about for a minute here about success stories that have been written at the individual level, and I think it's important to keep in mind that success stories can be written at higher levels as well. So take, for example, the state of California, which has been highly successful in reducing the burden of smoking on its population. The smoking rate in California is about half that of the rest of the nation. And that's due in large part to California being much earlier and much more aggressive and creative in the way that it has invested in multiple types of strategies and programs and policies to encourage people to kick the habit and to discourage young people from picking up the habit. So California was the first, for example, to have clean indoor air laws that covered restaurants and other places for public entertainment and workplaces to protect not only people who want to, or to support not only the people who want to kick the habit, but also to protect non-smokers from secondhand tobacco smoke. And we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that 50,000 Americans die prematurely every year from exposure to secondhand smoke. These are non-smokers who are being killed by cigarette smoking. So California has been very successful in its efforts, and they've done it through a multi-pronged approach. It's a success story that other states and communities should be looking at and trying to emulate.
So a quick question for the team. I'm going to try to move a little bit more quickly since we have about 15 minutes. I get a lot of happy face icons on my email, on my text messages, and I'll ask the group, is happiness a metric? Maybe Benjamin or David, happiness as a metric. Comments on that?
Happiness as a metric. So are you asking me, like, if we can measure sentiment, and that's something that we should actually measure?
Well-being, yeah. I feel better, happiness, the way I feel on any given day. I notice some of the new apps have that.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of them. I've seen that on, like, how was your run today? How was your mood? And I think that we can systematically track. I think there's been studies out there that show that your mood definitely influences your behaviors. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, it could be a metric. And I don't know, other than sentiment analysis, like how we measure it beyond that to say, well, you know, somebody's 75% happy and they're more successful. But that's an interesting question. It definitely made me think for a second.
Mm-hmm. Well, John, there's a metric called the Well-Being Index, which was co-developed by the Gallup organization and Healthways, and it measures not only the physical well-being of people, but also their mental health and psychological and emotional well-being. And that's easy to find online if you just look for the Well-Being Index.
How about let's extend, now just real quick, let's extend this notion of well-being to the concept of gamification, where we look at rewarding patients, but we also build this into a gaming process. I see that a lot online and a lot on Twitter and discussions about wellness and apps. Is that something that works into the equation a bit?
Yes.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we got to make it fun, and games are fun. I mean, by their very nature. I think that you could argue that the definition of a game is something that's fun. I mean, it's a very broad concept of bringing the fun factor into your decision making, and you know, rewards is one way to do it, but competition is another. Leaderboards. You know, I think it's so ingrained in us from an early age, competition and you know, gold stars, recognition in school. So that I think that it's going to be key for prevention in the future.
And a lot of these products are realizing it. Like you had mentioned that you showed us your Nike band earlier, for example. There's gamification in that with the social aspects people see. There's numerous studies that, you know, 70% of us fall into a social gamer kind of persona. Some of us are more competitive, but a lot of what you're seeing is that we're moving into that era. And I know that there's sometimes there's kind of a little bit taboo associated with the gamification word, but the reality is that it does work. We've seen great success with virtual medals and competition leaderboards, and it does work. And it's really about figuring out who your community is and adjusting your product or your tool, because I don't think that there's this common thing that you can just throw a leaderboard or throw badges into any system and it will make people engaging. It's about getting to back to the root behavior changes and understanding your community.
So I may want to post on Facebook for all my friends to see that I just ran 5 miles and wear that as a badge of honor. Do I want to post a health concern? Do I want to post my PSA or some clinical parameter? And how important is it to find the right audience who can empathize or understand that that type of post?
I know with when you start talking about there's actual like medical, there's regulation concerns associated with some of these deeper things. Maybe somebody else can chime in a little bit more. Most of the stuff we deal with is kind of public information that's not, can be scrutinized.
Mm-hmm.
I can comment a little bit on that. I mean, there's other places that you can go. There's an organization called Patients Like Me, where you can go and actually form a community around your specific disease and have conversations about treatments. You know, social media is going to play a critical role in, you know, research and data and how we share information about our health. You know, I think there's definitely a space for this, and I think we have to really think about it. We can definitely utilize, you know, and again, I want to go back to the research conversation a little bit, but we can definitely utilize social media in capturing data for research, because that is where the conversations are happening, and it's an opportunity to try to change some behaviors and try to also educate about some of the screenings that are available, so the good and the bad of it, and also you know, really listen and get a deeper understanding of some of the health concerns out there that doesn't necessarily get to the doctor's office, and we don't really have a good understanding of it. So it's an interesting area, and I think we have to think about it, and it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
I've got 2 questions that I want to start wrapping up our discussion a little bit. The first is around the emergence of technology. Just last week, the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas had a lot of innovation in flat screen technology and in games. But one of the surprising leads there was the emergence of some of the health-related technology. And I'm curious what the panel's thoughts are on the evolution of the smartphone, of the of those sort of technologies as helping drive this.
Yeah, definitely. The technology is kind of my background, John, and it's exciting because you're seeing a lot of people get into it. There's Jawbone Up, Nike Plus, Fitbit. You're seeing a lot of devices. One of the interesting things that I like to see is that the price points of these devices are going down, because right now they're still deemed as a luxury. Employers, like companies, are not going to buy, you know, all of their employees a $99 Fitbit, for example. And so what I'm seeing is we're seeing a trend in the market where smartphones are getting better battery life, they're getting more robust, and people keep them on themselves 98, 99% of the time. I mean, some people, you know, they say a smartphone is within arm's reach, you know, pretty much the entire day. And you're seeing these smaller accelerometers. There's some companies that there are little stickers that you can stick on toothbrushes. And so what I'm going to see is that I'm predicting is that there's going to be a trend in price drop on these tools where it's not going to be a luxury item, and the smartphone technology is going to be a great conduit where we're going to be able to reach a broad audience and actually catalyze more behavior change. Because like the phone example has push notifications, it's got technology sensors of all natures, and for me it's just an exciting time. And I think that these tools, these mini computers at our fingertips are really going to really do change to a broader audience.
And the technology right now is mostly passive, so it's about capturing your data as you do it, but I think in the next 3 to 5 years it'll be active. So it'll be the technology telling you what to do for your health, and not just like a text message, but I think we can envision a lot of really powerful and exciting things from technology in the next few years.
Is anyone using a device? I have my Fuel. I've been studying these devices a little bit. Any personal experiences about things that work that perhaps people in our audience might want to try or consider using?
Yes, I have tried almost everyone out there. I tell you, the interesting thing is it's really about what works for you. So if you're going to go a device route, I like the Nike Fuel Band. I like the Fitbit. To me, I think it's all about battery life. That's my biggest concern. I forget to charge things. And so apps on the smartphone are great too, but then you got to remember to activate them. So there's a balance, right? You know, you want to get your 10,000 steps in, but then you don't want to realize the day that you forgot to charge your device, that you missed those goals. And so I'd really recommend to the consumer to just really investigate out there and just talk to their friends and see what's successful, because you know, everybody doesn't have $150 for the Nike Fuel Band. I think it's great that it's on your arm versus like I've lost 3 Fitbits to date. Like, I'll just tell you that. Like, I've knocked that clip off. I think it's one of the better devices, but like I've lost 3 to date. And so from a device centric standpoint, I still have yet to find the ultimate device for me. I want something that I'm not going to lose, that I can keep on me 24/7. Maybe a microchip in my skin. I don't know.
Well, Naz, I have a question for you about technology, because in my experience, and I bet you, Benjamin, you'll agree with this, that most of the people I see with a Nike Fuel or a Fitbit or some of this sort of contemporary technology, most of those people are healthy. They're young, they're athletic.
Exactly.
How do we bridge that gap, and how can we get patients who are ill, patients who are overweight, who wear them and may be embarrassed, or what's the disconnect there about technology in the quote unquote diseased population?
You know, it's a great point, and it goes back to also same with the apps. I think those tend to target the younger population, and they do tend to be a little bit healthier. Although it's a great start because we want to keep them healthy, but the patients, the group that we have to be concerned about. I mean, I think some of that goes back into your workplace and what is offered at your workplace and motivational factors, but also the role of the physician. I think the physician has to play a larger role in prevention conversations, and unfortunately, there's just not enough incentives to sit and have a conversation with a patient about better diet and exercise. It's a 1-hour visit, and that cost, they're not going to get reimbursed for that from the insurance companies. They're supposed to see a patient in and out in 10-15 minutes and write a prescription. So I think we have to really empower the physician to have an opportunity to be part of that conversation, and also give them the incentives and make sure that, you know, the reimbursement system that we have set up, you know, matches what we're trying to accomplish.
So let me follow up, and I'm going to try to wrap things up a little bit here, but Nance, most of the physicians that I have seen are not great adopters of quote-unquote fitness technology. And that, you know, are we speaking to a group of people who aren't using it? And is it perhaps an option to get physicians using this technology, to get them wearing Nike Fuels? Or Benjamin, maybe you can answer that too.
Yeah, I actually, the interesting thing is that I've seen most physicians, obviously since they have better economics, tend to have iPhones, and they engage heavily into the medical app devices. And so I do see a bridge, and I can see a recommendation from the physicians onto specific apps on smartphones, because if you look in the health and fitness category, most of those things are free, and a lot of them can help change people. I mean, from offering rewards, like for example, like Art and Exercise, or tracking runs, or just getting people to a simple pedometer app. And so I do believe that we are going to start seeing more recommendations from these physicians. So that's my personal opinion.
That might be an important dynamic, because it seems that patients are seeking out technology and physicians are not pushing technology or apps or these devices in their direction.
Well, part of the answer to that goes back to Naz's point about incentive structures and reimbursements, and we need to change the perverse incentive system now that currently emphasizes volume over value, and Medicare is beginning to move in that direction with some of the changes under the Affordable Care Act, and the private sector could move with more alacrity in that direction if it wanted to, and if we incentivize healthcare providers, including physicians, to do the things that are going to help healthy people stay healthy and help the people, as Naz referred to earlier, who've received treatment or cures to remain cured rather than relapsing, then we need to have incentives so that they're doing the things that provide the greatest value, not only to society and the system, but to the patient, to the individual as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, if only my hour on the treadmill went as fast as the hour we just spent today, I'd be a healthier guy. But I want to take a moment to thank everyone for their participation, the team members who generously participated, but also the participants on Twitter and Facebook for submitting your questions. This is the end of our session today, but it's really not the end of the dialogue. Please join us at tedmed.com, where you could submit your questions. You can see a video repost of our discussion today. It's important that we move this along and keep the dialogue moving forward. This is an important issue. Our next discussion addressing the whole patient will be on Thursday the 24th at 1 p.m. Finally, I want to thank the Robert Wood Johnson for their generous support of this program. So in conclusion, I just want to remind you all that great challenges demand great thinking. Thank you for joining us today. Bye-bye.